The planet Valthera was known across the stars as a shining world of beauty and pride. Its skies shimmered with twin suns, and its tall glass towers glowed blue in the daylight. It was home to the Zarin Dominion, a powerful alien race known for their intelligence, long lives, and arrogance. They were tall, silver-skinned beings with bright crystal eyes. They ruled over many worlds and believed no species could match their greatness. When a human ship landed on their world for the first time, many Zarin thought it was a joke. Humans were a small young race from a dangerous planet called Earth, a place so wild and deadly that even Zarin explorers avoided it. The Dominion Council had invited one human, a simple engineer named Eli Vance, to work with them. The invitation was part of a peace program called the Exchange of Knowledge, meant to build trust between species. Eli arrived without guards, without fancy clothes, and without fear. He wore a gray work jacket, carried a small toolkit, and smiled at everyone he met. The Zarin scientists expected a loud, rude creature. Instead, they found a quiet, calm man who preferred listening over talking. But not everyone welcomed him. Among the Zarin officers stood Commander Eli Vance, one of the most respected and feared members of the Dominion military. She was brilliant, disciplined, and proud. To her, humans were primitive animals, reckless explorers who stumbled through the galaxy with courage but no wisdom. When she first saw Eli, she whispered coldly to another officer, "This is what the humans send us? A worker with dirt on his hands?" Eli heard her but said nothing. He simply nodded politely and went to work. The human was assigned to the main energy core, a massive power station under the capital city. The Dominion had been facing strange power surges for months, and their best engineers couldn't fix them. Eli offered to help stabilize the grid. For days, he worked quietly, studying their systems. The Zarin watched him curiously. He didn't use their advanced tools. Instead, he used a mix of simple scanners and small metal devices he had built himself. He moved slowly, testing one cable after another, sometimes humming old Earth songs while he worked. When one Zarin scientist asked what he was doing, Eli replied in a calm voice, "I'm listening to the system. Every machine speaks if you know how to hear it." The Zarin laughed. "Machines do not speak," the scientist said. Eli only smiled. "Not in your language, maybe." After 3 days, the lights in the city stopped flickering. The energy flow stabilized. The core operated better than it had in years. Reports came to the council that the problem was solved. The alien engineers were confused. The humans' methods made no sense according to their theories, yet his results were perfect. The council called a meeting in the Great Crystal Hall to discuss it. The hall was filled with glowing columns and shimmering light patterns. Hundreds of Zarin officers attended. Eli stood quietly at the center, facing the council table. The High Chancellor asked Eli to explain what he had done. Eli took a deep breath and began, "Your systems are overcomplicated. You try to control every reaction, but sometimes you just have to let energy flow where it wants. I redirected the main conduits and allowed the grid to balance itself." His words were simple, but the meaning was clear. He was saying that their technology was too proud, just like them. A wave of murmurs spread across the room. Commander Selara narrowed her eyes. She stood and spoke sharply. "So the human believes he understands our world better than we do?" Eli didn't flinch. "No," he said softly. "I just fixed what was broken." Her silver eyes flashed with anger. "You call the Dominion system broken? Watch your words, outsider." "I meant no insult," Eli replied. "I only followed the numbers." Selara stepped closer. "Numbers? Do you think your crude methods can match centuries of Zarin science? You are nothing but a repair worker from a savage world. Your kind barely escaped their own gravity wells." The hall grew silent. Everyone waited for Eli to defend himself. But he didn't. He just looked at her calmly, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he said, "Then perhaps you should not have called me here." His quiet voice carried through the hall like a whisper in a storm. No one expected it. Then slowly Eli turned to the council and added, "I'll continue to help where I'm needed, but I'll not argue over pride." He bowed slightly and walked out of the chamber, leaving the Zarin frozen in place. Later that day, Solara met with other officers in the military command center. She mocked the human again. He is weak. Look how easily he retreats. He hides behind silence instead of strength. But one young officer, Rinvek, disagreed. Commander, he did not retreat. He refused to fight your insults. That takes its own kind of strength. Solara glared at him. You defend the human? I only say what I saw, Rinvek said quietly. He did what none of us could. He fixed the core. Maybe there's more to humans than we think. Solara dismissed him with a wave of her hand, but the thought stayed in her mind longer than she wanted. Meanwhile, Eli continued working in the lower districts. The local Zarin citizens grew to like him. He helped repair their heating systems, cleaned energy lines, and even taught children how to build small light generators. He never asked for reward. He was just kind. Some aliens began greeting him in the streets. They called him the Silent Fixer. His patience impressed them, though they never said it out loud. But high above, in the grand halls of power, Solara's opinion of him remained the same. She saw his quiet nature as weakness, his patience as fear. She couldn't understand how someone could face mockery and not fight back. To her, respect was earned through challenge and dominance. Yet this human seemed to win respect by walking away. One evening, as the twin suns set over the shining towers, Eli stood on the balcony of his small workshop. He looked at the alien skyline, glowing blue and gold. He had traveled across the stars far from Earth, hoping to build bridges between species. But instead he had found walls of pride and judgment. He sighed and whispered to himself, "They don't have to like me. They just have to see the truth." Far away in the Dominion Palace, Solara was looking at a report from the Energy Department. It said that all systems were stable thanks to the human's adjustments. She read the line twice, frowning. Her assistant asked if she wanted to send a note of thanks. Solara hesitated, then said coldly, "No. Let him enjoy his small success. It will not last." She did not know that her words would soon return to haunt her, and that the quiet human she had insulted would soon save everything she had sworn to protect. That night the skies above Valthera shimmered strangely. Small flickers of plasma light danced at the edge of the upper atmosphere. Most Zarin ignored it, thinking it was a natural glow from the twin suns. But in his workshop, Eli saw something different. His scanners picked up a strange pulse, an unstable signal hidden deep within the power grid. He frowned, adjusted his instruments, and whispered, "That's not natural. Something's coming." Outside, the wind began to rise, and somewhere, in the distance, the first faint rumble of danger echoed across the stars. The next morning on Valthera, the twin suns rose behind a thin silver mist. The city lights flickered softly as the day began. The citizens of the Zarin Dominion went about their usual work, proud and certain of their own perfection. Only one person looked uneasy, the human engineer Eli Vance. He stood on the balcony of his small workshop holding a scanner. The screen showed strange waves of radiation rippling through the sky. The readings were faint but increasing. Eli frowned as he watched the data scroll past. The numbers looked familiar. He had seen a similar pattern once years ago, near the Terran colony of Aegis 9, just before a massive plasma storm struck and destroyed everything in orbit. He tapped the device again and muttered to himself, "It's the same. The same frequency. If this keeps growing, the storm will hit in less than 2 days." He saved the data, grabbed his toolkit, and hurried toward the Dominion Command Tower. The tower stood in the heart of the capital city. It was tall and made of glowing crystal that reflected sunlight in 1,000 colors. Inside, alien officers moved silently through wide silver halls. When Eli entered, many stopped and stared. Some whispered quietly. Others turned away. They still saw him as a strange creature from a harsh world. Eli ignored them and walked straight to the main command chamber, where Commander Solara Veth and several council members were in a meeting. He waited near the door until one guard finally said, "The human requests to speak, Commander." Solara looked up, annoyed. "Again?" she said. "What is it this time?" Eli stepped forward and placed his data pad on the table. "I found something in your power grid scans," he said calmly. "It's not a normal fluctuation. It's a signal, a natural one. A plasma storm is heading for your world." The council members looked at one another. Selara raised an eyebrow. "A storm?" she repeated. "We are under clear skies, human." "It's not visible yet," Eli explained. "But it's coming fast. When it hits, it'll flood your orbit with radiation. Your defense satellites and power systems will overload. You must prepare the shields now." Selara folded her arms. "You expect us to believe that?" "The Dominion weather system is perfect. Our instruments have detected nothing." Eli showed her the readings. "Your sensors look for local patterns. This storm is forming far beyond your sun. It's not weather. It's cosmic radiation from a magnetic collapse. It'll be here soon." Selara leaned closer and said in a cold tone, "Perhaps your primitive equipment sees ghosts, human. You come from a wild world full of storms and fear. Maybe you see danger where none exists." Eli kept his voice steady. "I've seen this before. I lost people to it. I know what it looks like." But Selara only smirked. "And yet you stand here alive to tell stories." "Perhaps your people exaggerate." The council laughed quietly. A few whispered jokes about humans being afraid of their own shadows. The noise echoed through the crystal hall. Eli stood in silence, his jaw tight but his eyes calm. When the laughter stopped, he said quietly, "You asked me here to help your systems. I am helping. You can ignore my warning if you wish, but when the storm comes, it will be too late." Selara's tone turned sharp. "You dare threaten us?" Eli shook his head slowly. "No, Commander. I'm warning you. There's a difference." For a long moment, the two stared at each other, the proud alien officer and the quiet human engineer. The air in the hall felt heavy. Finally, Selara waved her hand dismissively. "Enough. The Dominion does not act on human superstition. You may return to your workshop." Eli looked around the room one last time. None of them met his eyes. He gave a small nod and said, "Then I wish your people luck." And with that, he turned and walked out. Outside, the streets of Valthera were bright and peaceful. Children played near fountains of silver light. Hovercrafts moved smoothly through the air. Everything looked perfect, and yet Eli felt only unease. The readings in his scanner grew stronger by the hour. He knew what was coming, and it wasn't a simple storm. It was a wave of plasma and radiation so strong that it could burn through a planet's magnetosphere. Back in his workshop, he began preparing his ship, a small Terran shuttle called the Arc Sparrow. It wasn't much, but it had strong shielding. He had brought it from Earth years ago, and he always kept it ready to fly. As he loaded supplies, a familiar voice called from behind him. It was Rinvek, the young Zarin officer who had once defended him. "You're leaving?" Rinvek asked. Eli nodded. "I warned them. They won't listen. When the storm hits, this city won't stand without shield stabilization. I can't stop that alone." Rinvek looked worried. "Commander Selara doesn't believe you, but I've seen your work. You don't make mistakes. Should I warn others?" "Do what you can," Eli said softly. "But they'll only listen when they see it." Rinvek lowered his head. "If you go, they'll call you a coward." Eli smiled faintly. "Let them. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the only way to stay strong." With that, he sealed his ship's cargo door. The engines hummed to life, casting blue light on the workshop walls. Rinvek stepped back as the Arc Sparrow lifted into the sky, disappearing into the clouds. Hours passed. In the Dominion Tower, Selara sat at her desk reading new reports. Small glitches were appearing again in the energy network, sudden power spikes and communication failures. She frowned and called her engineers. They couldn't explain it. One said, "Perhaps it's still human interference." Another said, "He may have left us with errors in the system." Selara's anger grew. "He left because he was insulted," she said bitterly. Weak, emotional creatures, but deep down she felt a quiet unease. What if he had been right? She walked to the balcony and looked up at the sky. The twin suns glowed normally, but near the horizon she noticed faint streaks of light, like glowing threads weaving across space. The sight was strange and beautiful, but something about it made her chest tighten. That night, as darkness covered Valthera, the first signs appeared. High in orbit, the Dominion's outer satellites began to flicker. One by one, communication channels went dark. Alarms echoed across the control rooms. "Magnetic interference detected," one officer shouted. "Radiation levels rising," another yelled. Selara stared at the screens. The lights showed a massive wave approaching the planet, a storm of plasma larger than anything she had seen. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He was right. The plasma storm hit the outer orbit minutes later. Unprotected ships melted in seconds. The defense grid tried to activate, but the overload caused the main power relays to explode. Sparks filled the control rooms. The great crystal towers of the city flickered as energy surges spread through every circuit. Solara ran to the command console. "Activate emergency shields," she ordered. "We can't," shouted a technician. "The human stabilizers were disconnected when he left." Solara froze. "What did you say?" "He built a bypass system to balance the grid. We removed it yesterday. It didn't fit Dominion standards." She felt her throat tighten. All their pride, all their arrogance, it had blinded them. The humans' simple method had been the only thing keeping their world safe, and they had thrown it away. The command center shook as the first plasma wave struck the upper atmosphere. Lightning-like streams of fire danced across the sky. People screamed as energy barriers failed and parts of the city went dark. Solara grabbed a communicator. "Find the human," she shouted. "Now! Bring him back!" But it was too late. The locator showed nothing. Eli's ship was gone from their scanners. He had left the planet hours ago. Far above the burning clouds, Eli Vance watched from orbit. His ship trembled under the storm's energy. He had hoped the Dominion would listen, but they hadn't. Still, he couldn't look away. Through the storm's glow, he saw the cities below flicker, then dim. He clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "I warned them, but I won't let them die." He reached toward the ship's control panel and began typing a series of codes, one that would send a call across the stars. A call that could bring help if anyone was listening. Below, Solara looked to the sky as lightning painted it white. The world she had sworn to protect was falling apart, and the one being who could save it had walked away, one because of her. The storm had not yet reached the surface of Valthera, but the sky no longer looked calm. Strange colors shimmered across the clouds, violet, gold, and deep crimson. The air itself seemed to hum. To most citizens, it was beautiful. To Commander Solara, it was terrifying. She stood in the command center, her eyes locked on the trembling energy graphs. The lines rose and fell wildly, breaking every scale. Around her, technicians shouted, alarms wailed, and the blue lights that once glowed proudly in the hall began to dim. "Power surge in Sector 4, one officer cried. "Communications offline," another yelled. Solara's voice was sharp and cold, but her hands were trembling slightly. "Redirect emergency energy from the lower stations. Keep the city shields stable." "We can't, Commander," a technician replied. "The power grid is collapsing. The humans' bypass system balanced the load. We removed it." Solara froze. The words struck her like ice. Her mind flashed back to that day in the council hall when the human, Eli Vance, had quietly warned them. She remembered his calm eyes, his steady voice, his warning that pride would destroy them if they ignored reality, and she had laughed at him. Outside the tower, the first plasma waves reached the upper atmosphere. The sky exploded in silent fire. Lines of glowing energy danced across the horizon like living lightning. From the ground, it looked as if the heavens were tearing apart. Citizens ran through the streets in panic. Hovercrafts crashed as power failed. Whole districts fell into darkness as energy conduits overloaded and melted. The Dominion's perfect city, the symbol of their pride, was beginning to crumble. Solara watched the chaos from the upper balcony. Her eyes widened as entire sectors of the city went dark one by one. The plasma storm was too strong. Even their best defense technology couldn't stand without Eli's stabilizer system. She clenched her fists and whispered, "We were fools." Rinvek, the young officer who had once defended the human, ran to her side. His armor was scorched, his voice shaken. "Commander! The main shield generator is down. The energy conduits can't reroute without the human's network. We're losing the capital." Solara turned to him sharply. "Where is he? Has anyone found Eli Vance?" "No trace," Rinvek said. "His ship left orbit hours before the storm hit. He's gone." For the first time in years, Solara felt helpless. She who had commanded fleets and crushed rebellions now stood powerless against the fury of nature and her own arrogance. Far above the planet, the small human ship Arc Sparrow drifted through the storm. Inside, Eli worked fast, his face pale under the flickering light. The plasma waves slammed against his ship's shields, making the hull groan. He had sent a distress signal to the Terran fleet, but he didn't know if it reached anyone through the magnetic interference. He couldn't wait for help. He opened the data feeds, watching the Dominion's planet tremble under the storm. The city's energy grid looked chaotic, fluctuating, collapsing, surging again. He could see where their systems were failing one by one. He muttered to himself, "They can't control it. They'll lose the whole atmosphere if this continues." Eli knew he didn't owe the Dominion anything. They had insulted him, laughed at him, and dismissed his warnings. He had every right to leave them to their fate. But he couldn't. He thought of the children he had seen playing in the streets, of the old Zarin engineer who had thanked him for repairing her lights, of Rinvek who had treated him like an equal. He couldn't let them die because of pride. He reached for the controls and whispered, "If they won't listen, I'll fix it myself." He turned his ship toward the storm, diving back into the planet's atmosphere. Down in the capital, the storm's second wave struck. A shockwave of plasma energy crashed into the shields. The sky turned white, and for a few seconds it was as if the world had stopped breathing. Then, with a deafening rumble, parts of the outer shield shattered like glass. Buildings trembled. Energy conduits burst open. Fire and light filled the streets. Selara shouted orders over the noise. "Evacuate the lower districts. Get everyone to the underground shelters." Rinvek grabbed her arm. "Commander, we can't save them all. The grid is too unstable." Selara's voice broke slightly. "There must be a way. There has to be." Then one of the technicians pointed to the sky. "Commander, look." Through the clouds, a small glowing shape descended. At first, they thought it was debris, but then the scanners identified it. A Terran vessel. Rinvek's eyes widened. "It's the human."
"He's coming back!"
The Arc Sparrow roared through the storm, flames dancing around its hull. Inside, Eli's controls flickered wildly, warning of critical damage. But he didn't stop. His plan was simple but dangerous: to reconnect his ship's energy core to the Dominion grid, using his systems as a bridge. He opened a communication channel, sending his voice across every available frequency. "This is Eli Vance. I'm linking my ship to your main grid. You'll have 10 minutes of stability. Use it to reactivate your planetary shields." In the Dominion command center, Selara heard his voice echo through the static. She froze. The human she had insulted again and again was risking his life to save her world. "Get me a link," she shouted. "I need to speak to him." But the storm interference was too strong. They could only hear fragments of his voice, calm, focused, determined. "Rerouting conduits. Keep your shield harmonics stable." Selara clenched her fists. "He's doing it. Alone." Eli's ship shook violently as he forced energy through the plasma field. The readings turned red. The hull temperature rose dangerously. His vision blurred from the heat, but he kept his hands steady on the controls. He rerouted one conduit after another, connecting his small ship to the vast planetary grid. Slowly, lights across the city began to return. The shields flickered, then stabilized for the first time since the storm began. In the command tower, the technicians cheered. "The shield's holding." Rinvek smiled in disbelief. "He's doing it. The human's saving us." Selara stared at the glowing data stream, speechless. Every calculation, every circuit pattern, it was Eli's work. The same simple design she had called primitive. And now it was the only thing keeping her world alive. She whispered softly, "He warned me, and I called him weak." The realization cut deeper than any wound. Minutes felt like hours. The storm raged on, tearing at the planet's upper atmosphere, but the shields held firm. Finally, the main plasma wave began to fade. The sky slowly returned to normal, leaving behind a faint golden glow. The capital city was damaged, but it stood. Millions of lives were saved. As the last reading stabilized, Selara turned to her officers. "Find the human's ship. I want his location now." A few moments later, Rinvek looked up from his screen, his face pale. "Commander? His ship's signal is weak. He's near the northern spires. He crashed after the energy transfer." Selara didn't wait. She grabbed her coat and ran for the nearest transport. Outside the city, near the mountains, the remains of the Arc Sparrow smoked quietly in the dust. The hull was cracked and sparks danced across the wreckage. Inside, Eli was alive but barely conscious. His body ached, his mind heavy. He looked out the broken window at the calm horizon. The storm was gone. The world was safe. He smiled faintly and whispered, "Told you. It could work." Then his eyes closed and he slipped into sleep. In the distance, the hum of transport engines grew louder. Solara's ship landed beside the wreck. She stepped out, her silver armor scorched and cracked, her eyes wide with guilt and relief. Rinvek followed close behind. They found Eli lying near the ship's control seat, breathing slowly. Solara knelt beside him, her hand trembling as she touched his shoulder. "You came back," she whispered. "After everything we said, you still came back." Rinvek looked around the smoking wreckage and said quietly, "He didn't have to." But he did. Solara stared at the human's calm face, the face she once mocked. For the first time in her proud life, she felt small, not because of weakness, but because she finally understood what real strength looked like. The first light of dawn fell over the northern spires of Valthera, painting the shattered towers in soft gold. Smoke rose gently from the city below, twisting in the wind as if the planet itself was breathing a sigh of relief. The Arc Sparrow lay in ruin on the rocky ground, its hull scorched and battered. Inside, Eli Vance stirred, groaning as he opened his eyes. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself upright. He looked out through the cracked window of his ship. The city had survived. He had done what he could. Still, the weight of the storm lingered in the air. Even now, the planet's energy grid trembled in isolated areas, weak points that could collapse if not stabilized. He knew the Dominion needed him again, and this time it would not be easy. Far above, in the command tower of the capital, Commander Sel-Ara Veth prepared for a dangerous journey. Her silver armor bore scorches from the storm, her normally pristine appearance marred by the chaos. She moved quickly through the halls, issuing orders to technicians and engineers, trying to stabilize what she could before the human could intervene. She paused at a doorway and looked out over the recovering city. Her mind replayed the events of the storm, every insult she had thrown at Eli now coming back to haunt her. For years she had prided herself on her intelligence, her discipline, and her ability to command. Yet one quiet human had exposed the flaw she had ignored for so long. Pride without wisdom was dangerous. Solara's transport landed near the wreckage of the Arc Sparrow. The engines hissed as dust and smoke swirled around the landing site. Rinvek, her young officer, had accompanied her. He moved carefully across the uneven rocks, his eyes on the human lying motionless inside the wreck. "Commander," Rinvek said, his voice low, "he's alive, but he won't survive long if we don't get him medical attention." Solara's jaw tightened. She knelt beside the ship and gently shook Eli's shoulder. "Human," she said, her voice soft, almost unrecognizable. "You saved our world, and now you must help us again." Eli opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the sunlight. "Sel-Ara," he said quietly, recognizing her. "The grid, it's failing in some sectors. I thought you'd handle it." Her expression hardened, though a shadow of shame crossed her features. "We tried, but we need you, Eli. You are the only one who can stabilize it fully." Eli studied her face for a long moment. He saw her pride, her guilt, and her respect all tangled together. He had come to realize that the Zarin could be proud, yes, but their pride had blinded them. He shook his head slightly. "I warned you before. I told you not to ignore what I said." "You didn't listen." "I know," Solara admitted, "and we nearly lost everything because of it. Now I'm asking you to stay, to help us survive the after effects." Eli took a deep breath. He could leave. The Dominion had insulted him, laughed at him, and dismissed his warnings. He had every right to fly away, to leave them to their mistakes, and yet he remembered the children he had helped, the old engineers who had trusted him, the young officer Rinvek who had believed in him. He thought of the city still standing but fragile, and he knew what choice he must make. "I'll help," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But only because lives are at stake. Not for pride, not for thanks." The Dominion engineers followed Eli's instructions carefully. The first step was to reroute the energy conduits through underground channels, a method Solara had once mocked as primitive human tinkering. But Eli worked with precision. He moved through the control panels using his portable tools to interface directly with the Dominion system. As he worked, Solara watched silently. Every adjustment Eli made brought the grid closer to stability. The flickering lights began to glow steadily, the humming of the city's energy core returning to a smooth rhythm. "Careful," Eli said as he rerouted a conduit. "If this fails, it will overload the sector. You must maintain precise balance." Solara nodded, realizing that the human's calm focus was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. He didn't shout, he didn't panic, and he didn't argue. He simply acted with confidence and clarity. Hours passed. The storm had left the city scarred, but Eli's adjustment slowly repaired the most critical systems. Power began returning to whole districts. An emergency shield stabilized along the city's outer perimeter. Citizens watched from a distance, their fear turning to awe as they saw the systems glow steadily again. Solara finally spoke, her voice quiet. You could have left us. You didn't have to risk yourself again." Eli paused, his hands on the console. He looked at her. "I told you before. I walk away when pride rules, but I stay when lives are at stake. That's the difference." She frowned, absorbing the weight of his words. For centuries, the Zarin had believed that power and intellect alone earned respect. Now she understood something different. Courage, humility, and quiet strength could surpass pride in ways they could never anticipate. By mid-afternoon, the city's energy grid had stabilized. The streets below were filled with workers repairing damaged hoverways, helping citizens return to their homes, and clearing debris from the outer districts. Solara approached Eli once more. "You've done more than anyone could have imagined. The Dominion owes you its life," she said, her voice steady now, stripped of arrogance. Eli smiled faintly. "I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because it was the right thing to do." "That's all I ever do." She studied him carefully. "I insulted you, mocked your species, called your methods weak. And yet you saved us anyway." Eli shrugged lightly. "You may call it stubbornness. Humans are a strange species. We fight when needed, and we walk away when pride blinds others. I chose to fight this time." Solara fell silent, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and newfound respect. She had never admitted weakness before. Now she knew humility, and the cost of ignoring it. Rinvek, watching from the side, whispered to himself, "Humans. They walk away, and yet they leave strength behind." Solara heard him but said nothing. She was still learning to process the lesson Eli had shown her. For the first time, she understood that strength was not always loud or forceful. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, and brave. As the sun set over Valthera, painting the city in gold and purple, Eli finally allowed himself to rest. He had stabilized the energy grid and saved millions of lives, yet even as he leaned against the console, his mind worked on the next problem: repairs to the Ark Sparrow. The small shuttle had survived, but barely. Without it, he couldn't leave the planet safely. Solara stood nearby, observing him. "You could command a fleet," she said softly, almost to herself. "Yet you choose to do what others cannot." Eli looked at her, a faint smile on his face. "Command isn't always about orders or power. Sometimes it's about making the right choice when no one else will." Solara nodded slowly. She had never heard words like this spoken by a human before. It made her reconsider everything she believed about other species and about herself. That night, the city slept under a calm sky. The storm was gone, but its lesson remained. The Dominion had survived, not because of pride or power, but because one human chose to act when others could not. Eli, tired and battered, looked up at the twin moons. He knew he had done the right thing. Yet he also knew that the Zarin, proud and stubborn, would take time to truly understand the lesson he had taught them, and that was fine. Strength often spoke louder than words. As dawn approached, Solara approached him one last time. "Tomorrow I will formally apologize," she said. "But tonight, I simply want to say, thank you." Eli nodded. He didn't need more than that. Recognition was fleeting. Lives saved were permanent. And with that, the quiet human engineer allowed himself a small rest, ready to face the next challenge the galaxy might send his way, as he always had. The sun rose slowly over Valthera, casting long golden rays across the repaired city. Smoke from the storm had disappeared, leaving only faint traces along the horizon. Citizens emerged from shelters, stepping carefully over damaged streets. The city had survived, but its people were still shaken. Many looked to the sky, whispering about the quiet human who had saved them all. Inside the northern spires, Eli Vance stood outside the wreckage of the Ark Sparrow, surveying the repairs made by Dominion engineers under his guidance. He was calm, collected, as if the storm had been only a small test. His small toolkit lay nearby, the instruments he used to stabilize an entire planet now resting quietly beside him. Commander Sel-Ara Veth approached, her steps measured. She had spent the night organizing recovery efforts, personally ensuring the city's most vulnerable citizens were safe. For the first time, she walked beside Eli not as a superior, but as someone who understood that pride alone was insufficient. She stopped a few feet from him. Her usual silver armor gleamed faintly in the early morning light, but her face was softer, less guarded. "Eli," she said quietly, "I want to apologize." Eli raised an eyebrow, remaining silent. He had heard apologies before, but rarely meant much. This one, however, carried weight. Sel-Ara continued, "I insulted you. I mocked your methods. I doubted your strength and your intelligence. And yet you saved my world. You risked your life because you believed it was the right thing to do." She paused, struggling to find words beyond what formal protocol would allow. "I failed to see your courage, and I failed to see the truth in your ways. I was wrong. Thank you." Eli studied her face, noting the sincerity in her crystal eyes. He had faced arrogance many times in his life, but this was different. Sel-Ara's apology was genuine, not a display of authority or superiority. She had learned from the events, and he could see the change in her posture, the tone of her voice, and the quiet respect she offered. He nodded slightly. "Apology accepted," he said simply. "I didn't come here to be praised. I came to make sure people survived. That's all that matters." Sel-Ara smiled faintly, a rare, unguarded expression. "Then allow me to offer something more than words. Let me show you how we honor those who save lives." She led him toward a nearby plaza where the city's citizens had gathered. Engineers, officials, and ordinary Zarin stood in a large circle, their eyes wide with admiration. Whispers filled the air. "It is the human. He is the one who saved us all." Sel-Ara raised her hand to quiet the crowd. "Citizens of Valthera," she began, her voice steady, carrying across the plaza. "Today we witnessed something remarkable. One among us came from afar, a human from a distant world. He faced our arrogance, ignored our doubts, and chose to act when no one else could. He is Eli Vance." A cheer rose from the crowd. Some bowed in respect, others simply watched in awe. Eli remained calm, standing slightly apart from the ceremony as he always had. He didn't seek attention. He didn't need it, Sel-Ara continued. "We owe him not only our lives, but a reminder that strength is not always in domination or pride. Sometimes it is in courage, patience, and the willingness to do what is right. Today we learned that lesson because of him." The crowd erupted in applause. Children ran toward Eli, offering small gifts and flowers, inspired by the human who had risked everything for a species that had dismissed him. Older citizens nodded respectfully, some bowing their heads. Even the engineers who had once doubted him approached quietly, hands extended in gratitude. Rinvek stood at Sel-Ara's side, his eyes shining. "I told you, Commander," he said softly. "He is extraordinary." Sel-Ara only nodded. She felt a mixture of pride and humility. Pride that their world had survived, humility that they had needed an outsider to save it. Later, in a quieter area of the plaza, Sel-Ara approached Eli again. "If you ever wish to leave," she said gently, "know that Valthera will remember your name forever. Your courage has changed the way we see humans and the way we see ourselves." Eli looked at her, considering. "I may leave one day," he said. "But for now, I will stay. There is still work to be done, and I cannot abandon it." Sel-Ara tilted her head slightly, impressed. "You choose action over resentment. You choose life over pride. That is human in its purest form." Eli's faint smile returned. "Sometimes walking away is wise. Sometimes staying is necessary. The choice depends on the world and the people in it." Over the following days, the city recovered. Damaged buildings were repaired, energy systems stabilized, and citizens returned to their normal lives. But the story of the human engineer who had faced insult, risked everything, and saved an entire civilization spread across Valthera and beyond. Sel-Ara worked closely with Eli, learning his methods and helping integrate his simple yet effective techniques into Dominion engineering systems. It was the beginning of a new era, one in which Zarin pride would be tempered with humility, and human ingenuity respected throughout the stars. Even more importantly, Sel-Ara herself changed. Her arrogance diminished, replaced by a quiet awareness that no matter how strong one species believed itself to be, there was always something to learn from others. She had witnessed it firsthand. One evening, as the twin suns set over the city, painting the crystal towers in soft orange and pink, Solara and Eli stood together on a balcony overlooking Valthera. "Do you ever tire of this work?" Solara asked. Eli shook his head. "Not really. Every world, every system, every life is a challenge. I've learned that people, all kinds of people, are worth the effort. Sometimes that effort is quiet. Sometimes it's loud. But it's always worth it." Solara smiled faintly, her voice softer than usual. "You have changed us, Eli Vance, not by force, not by words, but by action. You have made Valthera stronger than it has ever been." Eli glanced at her, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "I didn't come here to change the Zarin. I came to do what was right. But if people learn something along the way, that's a bonus." Solara nodded. She didn't need more explanation. She had learned that sometimes strength was quiet, wisdom came from humility, and the smallest choices could save entire worlds. In the weeks that followed, Eli continued his work with the Dominion. Children still called him the Silent Fixer, engineers still studied his methods, and citizens remembered the calm human who had faced insult and refused to fight, only to return and save them all. Solara, once proud and unyielding, now worked beside him not as a superior but as an ally. She learned from his patience, his quiet confidence, and his courage. The Zarin Dominion had survived, not because of its technology or arrogance, but because one human chose to act when others hesitated, and in doing so, Eli Vance had left a mark that would never be forgotten. A mark that reminded the galaxy that courage, kindness, and wisdom were not limited to any one species. One quiet night, as Eli prepared to rest in his repaired shuttle, Solara approached him once more. She held a small, simple token, a crystal medallion from Valthera engraved with the words, "For the one who chose right over pride." She handed it to him silently. Eli looked at it, then at her, and finally smiled. "I will keep it," he said simply, "not for pride, not for thanks, but because it reminds me that even the smallest actions can change the course of the stars." Solara nodded. "And you've changed us, every one of us." The city below rested in peace, the twin suns reflecting a world forever altered by the courage of one quiet human. And somewhere in the hearts of the Zarin, a lesson remained. That pride could be tempered, wisdom could be found in unlikely places, and the quiet strength of a human could echo across the stars. The end.